So today we're going to talk about scope creep, a subject that is near and dear to my heart because in my 30-odd years of experience, it's a topic that comes up quite often in development and causes or can cause a lot of problems in your delivery of a project across the board. It can cause problems, obviously, can impact negatively your schedule, your cost, your effort hours. It can even negatively impact your quality. It can have, obviously, a negative impact on customer satisfaction and even on the project team morale. So it's a subject that I feel is very important and hope that you can take away some things you learned today to help your situations and your organizations manage scope creep, because it's going to exist. We just need to know how to recognize it and manage it and minimize it as much as possible. So I've broken down today's presentation in about 5 topics here. The first one is the definitions. What is project scope? What do we mean by project scope? What do we mean by scope management? And what do we mean by scope creep? And then we're going to talk about causes of scope creep. We're going to look at, is all scope creep bad? And then we're going to look at how we can avoid it and how we can manage the scope creep that's not avoidable. So we'll go on forward now and take a look first at these definitions of scope, scope management, and scope creep. Okay, the Project Management Institute, Project Management Body of Knowledge, defines project scope as the features and functions that are to be included in a product or service, and the work that must be done to deliver a product with the specified features and functions. They go on to define project scope management as the processes required to ensure that the project includes all of the work required and only the work that's required to complete the project successfully. So a couple of important parts of that definition: all the work required and only the work required, not anything else that you might want to throw in, just what is required and only what is required. And then looking at the definition of scope creep, and this definition comes from the International Function Point Users Group glossary. We define scope creep as additional functionality that was not specified in the original requirements, but it's identified as the scope is being clarified and the functions defined. This can go on from the very beginning of the project through delivery, and so we want to be able to recognize it and manage it throughout the scope of the project. Other terms besides scope creep, some companies call it scope change, scope gallop. I've heard a few other terms, but basically we're all talking about the same thing, things that are introduced after the requirements have been signed off on and impact your estimates of schedule and effort and duration, quality, and things like that. So big statement here. Scope creep is the primary cause of late deliveries and potentially never-ending projects. This obviously also means that If we have late deliveries, we're going to have cost overruns, we're potentially going to have poor quality, and I have seen, I'm sure you probably have too, these never-ending projects, or perhaps they go on for so long they become obsolete or just too costly, and so they're completely dropped, and a lot of money and time and effort have been spent in a project only to have it never get to the end point. And usually that is because of poor requirements defined initially, and poor management of scope, creep, or change throughout the project. Okay, we're going to look at causes of scope creep right now, and I saw this little cartoon. I thought it summed it up pretty well, where the lady says, I know I just went to buy milk, but I found some things to go with it, and the guy's like, a movie DVD? Come on. Okay, so, we can all identify with going to the grocery store, and, we're only going to buy 5 things, and we come out with 50. So I just kind of like that little cartoon there. So, causes of scope creep. We have several. We've covered several slides. First of all is poorly defined project scope in the project statement. This obviously can have a trickle-down effect. If you don't define your project scope well initially, it's going to trickle on down throughout your whole life cycle of your project and impact it all the way through. So it's critical that from the get-go, the project scope is defined very well and correctly and completely, and as you'll see as we go through, that it is a meeting of the minds between all project stakeholders. So in this first bullet, not clearly identifying what is in scope and what is not in scope is just as important as identifying what is in scope. So your project statement, whatever you want to call that, that first thing about declaring what the project is and what it involves, has to include both what is going to be included in the project and what is out of scope for this particular project. The next bullet talks about poor requirements analysis, not spending enough time gathering your business requirements and assuming you know what is needed. So in this particular situation, it's very important that you talk to the customer, all the project stakeholders. There should be back and forth dialogue until everything has been brought out that's needed and it's clear and complete, and the requirements are understood by everyone and agreed upon by everyone. So you really need to spend some time doing some really good requirements of analysis so that you know up front what is needed and that it's understood by all the project stakeholders and agreed upon by all the project stakeholders. Poor project requirements. Requirements are ambiguous or open to interpretation and not fully documented. I have seen requirements